Hi, Tony, and I want to welcome you to our study now in Second Corinthians. We're still in chapter 1. Whether we know it or not, one of God's, in fact, the greatest gift God offers us is a personal friendship relationship with Him. Uh, Dallas Willard puts it like this, that we can live a Jesus kind of life. What did Jesus live? He lived this intimate, close, loving relationship with the Father. And that's what God offers us. There are three tools that God uses, and we can use a triangle to imagine them. So at the base of the triangle, we can think about spiritual disciplines. We heard that word discipline. The author of Hebrews has something to say about it.
He wrote, "Now discipline always seems painful rather than pleasant at the time, but later it yields the peaceful fruit of righteousness to those who have been trained by it." Hebrews 12:11.
The discipline, which takes some work of prayer, is a little harder to do than scrolling through Facebook. Uh, Bible reading can sometimes be hard. You read things that you don't understand, or even harder, you read things that confront you and you have to change. Times of solitude and silence, as opposed to being participants in all the noise of this world, that's a discipline. Discipline fits into the category of something that is important but not urgent. Something that's important and urgent, like getting to work on time. Spiritual disciplines, reading your Bible, having a prayer time, they're important, but they're not urgent. Now, there's some things in our lives that are not important, nor are they urgent, like video games and scrolling through Facebook and so on. Spiritual disciplines require us to discipline ourselves so that we can enter into that relationship with the Lord that He desires and we desire. So if you think about a triangle, the base of the triangle is based on things such as prayer, Bible reading, solitude, and some other things that we don't have time to talk about. Number one. The second side of the triangle has to do with obedience. Here's what Isaiah had to say.
Isaiah 1:19 through 20. "If you are willing and obedient, you shall eat the good of the land. But if you refuse and rebel, you shall be devoured by the sword. For the mouth of the Lord has spoken."
Did you hear that? If you're willing and obedient. God has everything. There's one thing God doesn't have. He doesn't have your heart. He doesn't have my heart. He doesn't have your heart. To get that, we have to offer that to Him. So the willing obedience draws us into the love relationship with God. What did Jesus say?
John 14:15. Jesus got to the heart of the matter when he said, "If you love me, you will keep my commandments."
So willing obedience is absolutely essential to living in a loving and a friendship relationship with God. And we might pray and read our Bibles and have times of solitude and do other spiritual disciplines, but if we're not obeying God, they're pretty empty. So John said something.
1 John 3:18. Rightly did John teach, "Little children, let us love, not in word or speech, but in truth and action."
We have two sides of the triangle. One is the foundation of prayer, Bible study, solitude, quiet, worship, things like that. Another side is giving to God our willing obedience. If we're willing and obedient, Isaiah says, then you'll get the things that God has for you. But the third side's a strange one. That's the side of difficulty, hard times. The spiritual literature calls that the crosses, CROSS, crosses in life. One fellow, after he had gone through a really hard time, said, "Man, the way God treats His friends, I wonder if He has any friends at all." And yet, Paul knew that God would draw us into even a deeper life with Him through the hard times that we have. Many of my friends who've been in AA have discovered this. When they hit rock bottom, that was when they turned to God. And so before, they were committed to disobedience, and the only time they prayed was when they got in trouble and they had to do what they call a 911 prayer. But their rock bottom experience drew them to the Lord. Paul had a similar experience on the road to Damascus, but then throughout his life, he had other hard times that led him to Christ. And this leads us to the verses for today out of 2 Corinthians.
2 Corinthians 1, 8 and 9. He wrote, "We do not want you to be unaware, brothers and sisters, of the affliction we experienced in Asia, for we were so utterly, unbearably crushed that we despaired of life itself. Indeed, we felt that we had received the sentence of death, so that we would rely not on ourselves, but on God, who raises the dead."
Now, don't miss that. His hard times gave him a new dimension of grace, and that was to depend upon God, even for life. Now, there was a time when Paul didn't respond well, and there's a really interesting statement about his experience on the road to Damascus.
In Acts 26:14, at his conversion on the Damascus road, Jesus said to Paul, "Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me? It hurts you to kick against the goads."
And I read that years and years ago. I said, what in the world is that all about? Well, the way they would direct the path of a team of oxen would be with a sharp stick. You'd stick it, a goat it on one side, and they would go whichever way you wanted to go. Well, if the ox kicked back, obviously the only one getting hurt would be the ox. And that's true for us. When we're in the middle of hard times and we respond by resisting God, who's getting hurt? Only us. Well, that was Paul's experience before Jesus changed his heart. But then later on, what he experienced was when he had these hard times, it drew him to deeper dependence on God. What's interesting about AA is when people kind of, what's the term my friends use is when they're just through, when they've had all they can do. You do all you can do till you can't do it anymore, they say. When they reach that point, they stop and do what they do. They do what Paul did. They surrender to God. And they find that their dependence on God is what takes care of them. Now, what's true for AA is true for Tony, is true for me. When we get in hard times, we should not use those hard times as a time to resist God, but rather to surrender to God. Here are three things: spiritual disciplines, prayer, Bible study, other things. Willing obedience. God, I'm willing to do what you tell me to do. And the third is when hard times come, that's a big flag waving saying, trust in God with all you have. Well, thanks a bunch for being a part of this today. God bless you. You have a great day. We'll see you tomorrow.